Hey everyone, how are we doing now that we're all locked down in our homes for the foreseeable future? Since we're all quarantined in our homes with nothing better to do, I figured I would go ahead and record a video since I haven't posted a vlog in quite some time. When I went on Instagram to ask what you guys wanted to see, quite a few of you were like, hey, can you review more model horse films, talk a little bit about the cinematics and whatnot. And there is one episode that I've been meaning to review for quite some time, and that is Am I Not Merciful's Insignia. So Am I Not Merciful approached me about reviewing the first episode when it first came out, I think in August 2nd, I believe is when it came out. Yes, August 2nd, 2019, before the coronavirus destroyed all of our lives. So if you haven't seen any of my past videos like this, I basically take a look at cinematography, editing, sound design, and kind of come at it from a film student's perspective and give some critique and analysis. All of the series that I review, the creators have approached me to review them. I never want to review anyone's content that they didn't ask to be reviewed, mainly because there's different purposes when we each make films, right? Some of us just make films because we want to have fun, and then others of us want to kind of improve our filmmaking craft. So while this is very directed at an individual creator, there is definitely some stuff here that you can learn to make things more polished. So without any further ado, why don't we jump in and review episode 1 of Insignia. So during this opening scene, you'll notice that there's a lot of secondary motion, and secondary motion is all of the movement that you see in the camera. Secondary motion, if you use too much, can prove a little nauseating, but a lot of times you'll have secondary motion in scenes that are supposed to feel chaotic. So in this opening scene, all of this secondary motion really is helping enhance the kind of chaos that this character is feeling, and it kind of brings the audience in closer because all of a sudden we too are now feeling that chaos. If you're using secondary motion like this in another scene that isn't necessarily supposed to be disorienting for the audience, then that's where you run into some trouble of, do you really want that much secondary motion? Now, a lot of times when you're looking at model horse films, people add secondary motion in post through the use of zooms and pans, and that's just to kind of help give the horses more emotion since they are stationary objects. There's also a moment where the focus goes in and out, which is also a really good touch. This even more so brings the audience in and makes them feel like a character because it's almost like their vision is going in and out. And it again enhances that idea of things being disorienting. Some of the weaknesses, there was one shot that was unnecessarily unclear, and that was just a simple focus issue. I know myself, I used to work with a Sony Handycam which did not have any manual focus, it was all autofocus, so I 100% feel the pain and struggle there if you are someone who's using a camera that only has autofocus. However, if you are using something like a DSLR, which I'm recording on right now, where you can have interchangeable lenses, a lot of times you can go into manual focus and you can just change the focus ring there. But I'm having a feeling that this is just some like a Sony Handycam saying, oh no, I don't want to focus on that. What are you talking about? So on this shot that has a zoom in, I would make it a little bit slower. I would almost make the cut a little bit longer so we can see the character's thought process unfold on screen. It doesn't have to be that long because obviously they were just attacked by somebody, so you're gonna be freaked out, but you are gonna kind of sit and think about, okay, what is my next step? But also, who is this person? A nice audio cue for something like that might just be the character breathing. I know I had a fight scene in episode 4 of Necrosis. It wasn't really a fight scene, it was more like, oh, we're boys with testosterone and we're mad at each other. But I had a character breathing to signify, okay, things are getting a little tense and we're thinking about what we're about to do in the situation, and both of us are just waiting for the other person to make the next move. This isn't the same, but it's just something that you can play with to kind of make the sound design feel a little bit fuller. And that's something I'm really going to be focusing on throughout the course of this video, is the sound design specifically. Sound is probably the easiest thing to neglect, but one of the most important things, and also one of the hardest things to do. So as for the sound design of this scene, the music is what's giving us tone, and the fire crackling is what's giving us ambience and information on what this space is like. Something that might be interesting to add audio-wise, just to give the audience a little bit more information of the space, would be like flies buzzing around or crows cawing. You know, this is a field of dead horses. There's a scene coming up in Necrosis where it's not the same, but it's similar, and I use the fly thing, and for me it just made things sound a little more full and kind of like a Ooh. Moving on to scene 2. My biggest thing here was again sound. I just wanted a little bit more ambience. What does this space sound like? You only really have 2 ways of getting information across in terms of what the space looks like to the audience. You have visually what they see and what they hear. So for me, I just didn't really have much information. Even something as simple as hearing the characters walk would have given me some more information. Now, if this place is supposed to be dead, because obviously this is in the aftermath of a war, you sit and think and you're like, well, everything's dead. You're really not gonna hear anything. But something that'll really help add to that isolation, if that's what you're going for, would be something like wind. Wind does a great job of making things feel more isolated. You don't necessarily have to have leaves rustling. You don't necessarily have to have birds chirping, because obviously those add elements of just life. But if this is supposed to be dead, something like wind will really help isolating. If not, birds, cicadas if it's summertime. There is a little bit of cricket sound that gives the audience some information, but I almost think that's part of the audio track and not necessarily an intentional piece. Something else to help visually add to the isolation, if that's the goal, would be desaturating some of the colors. Now, I think this is kind of desaturated already, so I don't know if this is necessarily a note that would apply to Insignia specifically, but just something kind of broad as a whole. If you're wanting to make something feel cold and isolated, desaturating or changing the tones to be a little bit cooler if you have that ability in your editing software. The cinematography in this scene I really liked, especially in the opening bit where the character is walking. And I really like this concept of war and its aftermath and everybody almost kind of having to deal with that thing. It's a great concept if you're trying to think of something that's a very small ensemble, but still deals with a lot of those political issues that you see in some of the bigger series where you have a larger ensemble. It's just a very creative approach to saying, I want to talk about something bigger than what I necessarily have the means for. Scene 3, the cinematography and the color is very nice and it's very eerie, especially with this horse just there dead on the river. Like, okay. I am curious though, because you said that the water was toxic and you have this dead horse lying right next to the water. So my assumption was, oh, he died because the water's toxic. That's how this character made the assumption that the water's toxic. But then when we walk up to that dead body, we see that there's just a huge gash on it. So it makes me wonder, okay, is that how the character died? And then how did this other character come to the assumption of, oh, the water's toxic? Or was that their original assumption and then they realized something else had happened? And in which case, is that something important that the audience needed to be informed of in terms of the character's decision making? Moving on to the last scene, the composition of these shots was just so satisfying to me as an editor and someone who really loves cinematography. It just flowed really well and the pacing was there and I dug it. So we have a little bit of a tiff between 2 of these characters, and something that makes fight scenes or anything that's really physical between 2 characters believable, especially in model horse films, but this is just general to films as a whole. A lot of what makes it believable is a cut on the action. So what a cut on action does, even if it's something as simple as opening a door, it almost masks your cut that's there, right? So my suggestion there would be to cut on the action and make sure that when you're doing your different shot setups, you film the action in its entirety. So when you get into post, you can decide where you want that cut to be in the action. I'm really loving the character dynamic between these 2. God damn it, let me take care of you. To me, they just feel very real and I'm very interested to see where these characters go. So moving on to my overall notes for the first episode of Insignia. I really loved the music choice. It was very fresh. That's something that I want to say very much across the board for this piece. It feels very fresh and very inventive, and it feels like this isn't something I've seen yet in the model horse medium. I feel like a lot of the typical model horse tropes that we see are going to be turned on their head in Insignia, while at the same time you're going to be completely forging your own new ideas and new themes. So my biggest challenge for you moving forward with your series would be to take a little bit more time focusing on your sound design. I'm not gonna lie to you, when I'm making a cut for an episode, 90% of my time in the editing process goes towards sound design because it is such a tedious task. I understand 100% the struggle that's there, but it is a challenge. It's a challenge for a reason. I just think that's the place that probably needs the most work, and I think that's the case for a lot of Model Horse films, unfortunately. It's just because sound is, again, it's so tedious. But the writing is there. I love the character dynamics, and I'm really curious to see where they'll go. The dialogue felt very organic. Nothing felt like cringy to me. I didn't go, ugh, like in Frozen 2. Hey, Frozen 2 had terrible sound design. I'm sorry. Like, there's no ambience. And show yourself. When she's raising the ice, that should feel so powerful. You should hear them. You should feel the weight of the ice, but you don't. It drives me insane. Anyways, I was talking about writing. In Frozen 2, Kristoff is like, hey, everything's gonna be fine, come here. And to me, that line was just like, ooh. Anyways, fantastic job. I cannot wait to see more and see what you'll do with it. I'm very excited. So everyone make sure you go check out Am I Not Merciful series Insignia. There is just one episode up right now, and it was again released in August. So it's very recent, very new. And if you have a series that you would like me to sit and review because you want to make things more cinematic and you want to learn a little bit, definitely let me know. I feel like, because I've only done 3 of these, my format of how I like review things is changing every single time. So hopefully at some point we'll get into a groove where just the things I'm looking at and the way I present it is the same. Alright everyone, enjoy your quarantine. I will see you guys hopefully soon in another video, but if not, I hope you have enough toilet paper. Bye guys.